Open your refrigerator door tonight and you will meet one of the most quietly revolutionary objects in human history, and you will not think about it at all. You will reach for milk that has not soured, meat that has not turned, butter that has not melted into a rancid puddle, and you will close the door without a second thought. For nearly the entire span of human civilization, that small, cold, humming box did not exist, and its absence shaped nearly every hour of nearly every day. In February of 1806, a 23-year-old Boston merchant named Frederick Tudor loaded a ship called the Favorite with over 100 tons of ice cut from a frozen New England pond. He was sending it to the tropical island of Martinique, where the temperature never dropped below 70 degrees. The Boston Gazette reported the voyage as a joke. No one in the city's shipping trade would agree to carry the cargo, certain that a vessel full of melting water would flood and sink itself before it ever reached open sea. Tudor had to buy his own ship just to prove them wrong. When the cargo finally reached the Caribbean, most of it had already melted, and there was nowhere on the island built to store what remained. Tudor lost money on that voyage. He lost money on the next one too, and the one after that, until he spent time in a debtor's prison for the debts his ice had created. To understand why anyone would risk their fortune, their freedom, and their reputation shipping frozen water across an ocean, you first have to understand what life was like without it. Because before Frederick Tudor, and long before the refrigerator that would eventually make him irrelevant, keeping food from rotting was one of the oldest and most exhausting problems a household could face. For most of history, food simply did not wait. Milk turned within hours in summer heat. Meat had to be eaten, salted, or smoked within a day or two of slaughter, or it became a danger rather than a meal. Families with no means of cooling shopped for food nearly every single day, sometimes twice a day, because there was no way to keep anything fresh until tomorrow. In cities, that meant a daily walk to the market, rain or shine, carrying home only what could be cooked before nightfall. In the countryside, it meant a constant cycle of preserving whatever the season provided, because winter offered no fresh food at all. Households built an entire toolkit for outrunning decay. Meat was packed in barrels of salt so heavy it had to be soaked out again before it could be cooked. Fish was smoked over slow fires for days until it turned leathery enough to survive for months. Vegetables were pickled in vinegar, fruit was boiled into thick preserves, and root vegetables were buried in sand-filled cellars dug below the frost line, where the earth itself became the insulation. Some families built small spring houses directly over running streams, letting the naturally cold water chill their milk and butter through the hottest weeks of summer. None of these methods were primitive. They were the accumulated engineering of people who had never known anything else, refined across generations of trial and failure. But every one of them came at a cost. Salted meat lost its texture and half its flavor. Smoked fish kept but grew tough and fiercely salty. And a root cellar could do nothing at all for a family's meat or their milk. The real danger was invisible. Spoiled milk and rotten meat carried bacteria nobody could yet name, and in the hottest months of the year, infant mortality in American and European cities climbed sharply, driven in large part by children drinking milk that had already turned before it reached their mouths. Doctors of the era did not understand the science behind it. They understood the pattern well enough to dread the arrival of July. This is the world Frederick Tudor was born into, and the ice he was so desperate to sell was never a luxury drink garnish. It was, quite literally, a way to buy an ordinary family more time against decay. New England in winter sat on exactly the resource the tropics lacked. Ponds froze solid enough to hold a man's weight, and thousands of tons of that ice simply waited there every year, completely free for anyone willing to cut it loose. The work of harvesting that ice became one of the most physically brutal and thoroughly forgotten trades in American history. Crews walked out onto frozen ponds before dawn, scored the surface into a measured grid with horse-drawn ice plows, then sawed the blocks free by hand, floating them down channels of open water toward the shore. Men slipped through thin ice more often than anyone liked to admit. Some drowned within sight of their own crew, pulled beneath the very surface they had been cutting apart minutes before. Others lost fingers to the saws or suffered frostbites severe enough to cost them a hand.
The blocks themselves, some weighing hundreds of pounds, had to be hauled up ice-slicked ramps with hooks and chains, then packed immediately into ice houses insulated with sawdust, a waste product borrowed for free from New England's own lumber mills.
Packed correctly, ice cut in January could survive a 4-month sea voyage and still arrive solid enough to sell. Tudor eventually made that voyage work. By 1833, his ships were delivering ice to Calcutta, 4 months and 16,000 miles from the pond it was cut from. Within a few years, he owned ice houses from Havana to Bombay, and by the time of the American Civil War, roughly 2 out of every 3 households in Boston and New York received ice at their door every day. Ice had become one of the most valuable cargoes shipped out of American ports, ranked just behind cotton. The joke that began with a mocked shipment to Martinique had become a global industry worth millions, built entirely from something that fell out of the sky for free. But even at the height of the ice trade's success, a quieter, stranger idea was forming 500 miles to the south, in a small Florida port plagued every summer by yellow fever. A physician named John Gorey watched patients suffer through fevers that only seemed to break once the weather finally cooled. And he became convinced that if he could cool the air around a sick patient artificially, he might save more lives than medicine alone ever could. Using compressed air and a system of coils, Gorey built a working machine that made its own ice, with no pond, no saw, and no 4-month voyage required. He patented it in 1851. And the ice trade's most powerful players, whose entire fortune depended on cutting ice from frozen water, treated Gorey's invention as a threat rather than a breakthrough. Historians who have studied the period believe Frederick Tudor's own business circle helped fuel a public smear campaign against the doctor, mocking him in the press and frightening away his investors. Gorey died in 1855, broke, discredited, and largely forgotten, only 4 years after inventing the very machine that would one day make Tudor's empire obsolete. It would take decades for mechanical refrigeration to recover from that early ridicule. Breweries and meatpacking plants adopted it first, because keeping beer cold and keeping slaughtered meat safe across long distances was worth the enormous cost of industrial machinery. Refrigerated rail cars let Chicago's meatpackers ship dressed beef to cities that had never once had reliable access to fresh meat. But the ordinary home remained the province of the Iceman for decades longer. Families placed a small printed card in their front window each morning, numbered on 4 sides, 25, 50, 75, 100 pounds, turned to show exactly how much the Iceman should carry up the stairs that day. Children in cities across the country grew up chasing the ice wagon in summer, begging for the chips that fell from the block as it was hauled into a neighbor's kitchen. The final shift did not arrive until 1927, when General Electric introduced a strange-looking steel cabinet with a round compressor mounted on top, nicknamed the Monitor Top after the gun turret of a Civil War ironclad it resembled. It launched at several $100s, more than most families could easily justify, but the price fell quickly, and utility companies soon offered it for as little as $10 a month, added straight to the electric bill. For the first time, a household needed no daily deliveries, no seasonal harvesting, no trip to a spring house. It needed only an outlet in the wall. Through the hardest years of the Great Depression, families who could no longer bear to throw away food found the Monitor Top's promise almost impossible to resist, and New Deal loans that brought electricity into rural America made the choice even easier. Within a decade, the Iceman's daily rounds through American neighborhoods, a fixture of city life for well over 100 years, had all but disappeared. What replaced them changed far more than the inside of a kitchen. Reliable cold storage meant a family no longer needed to shop every single day, so the daily walk to the butcher and the greengrocer slowly gave way to a single trip each week, and eventually to the sprawling suburban supermarket, built entirely on the assumption that food could wait safely at home. Leftovers, once a genuine health risk, became an ordinary part of a family's routine. An entire frozen food industry, pioneered by a fur trader named Clarence Birdseye, who had watched fishermen in the Canadian Arctic flash freeze their catch in the wind, found a market only once households finally had a freezer compartment waiting to receive it. The refrigerator did something almost no other invention manages to do. It did not simply solve a problem. It erased the memory of the problem so completely
that most people alive today have never once had to plan their day around the risk of their dinner rotting before nightfall. The Iceman, the ice harvester who risked his fingers and sometimes his life on a frozen pond in January, the family checking a numbered card in their window every morning, all of it vanished quietly into a hum behind a kitchen wall.
The next time you open your refrigerator door and reach for something cold, remember that you are standing at the end of a very long and very human story, one that took drowned ice cutters, a ridiculed doctor, a stubborn Boston merchant, and well over a century to finally arrive at something as simple as not having to think about it at all. Open your refrigerator door tonight and you will meet one of the most quietly revolutionary objects in human history, and you will not think about it at all. You will reach for milk that has not soured, meat that has not turned, butter that has not melted into a rancid puddle, and you will close the door without a second thought. For nearly the entire span of human civilization, that small, cold, humming box did not exist, and its absence shaped nearly every hour of nearly every day. In February of 1806, a 23-year-old Boston merchant named Frederick Tudor loaded a ship called the Favorite with over 100 tons of ice cut from a frozen New England pond. He was sending it to the tropical island of Martinique, where the temperature never dropped below 70 degrees. The Boston Gazette reported the voyage as a joke. No one in the city's shipping trade would agree to carry the cargo, certain that a vessel full of melting water would flood and sink itself before it ever reached open sea. Tudor had to buy his own ship just to prove them wrong. When the cargo finally reached the Caribbean, most of it had already melted, and there was nowhere on the island built to store what remained. Tudor lost money on that voyage. He lost money on the next one too, and the one after that, until he spent time in a debtor's prison for the debts his ice had created. To understand why anyone would risk their fortune, their freedom, and their reputation shipping frozen water across an ocean, you first have to understand what life was like without it. Because before Frederick Tudor, and long before the refrigerator that would eventually make him irrelevant, keeping food from rotting was one of the oldest and most exhausting problems a household could face.